Masechet Nedarim Daf Pechet. We begin with an interesting Mishnah that teaches Yodea ani sheyesh nedarim, aval en yodea sheyesh mefirin yafer. A husband hears his wife makes a vow. However, he doesn't know the laws of hafarat nedarim, and so he's upset. His wife said, "I'm not going to drink wine." He is upset about that, but he didn't know this halacha. He missed that day in school, so he didn't know that he can nullify it. However, later on, he does Daf Yomi, he learns Masechet Nedarim. He says, "Oh, that vow that she made some weeks ago, I know I can nullify it. How can I nullify it now?" So the law is, because he says, I knew that there was such a thing as nedarim. I know that she made a neder and it's binding, but I didn't know I had the power to nullify it. I was totally ignorant about it. Therefore, on the day that I heard that she had a vow, the fact that I did not nullify it, my silence was not evidence that I agreed to it and wanted it to be ratified by the end of the day. It was a sign of nothing. So therefore, yafer, everyone agrees on this point. There's no machloket. On the day that he hears about it, on the day that he learns this halacha, that will be considered the day that he hears about it. And he says, "Oh, I just learned this halacha. I never wanted her to make that vow." He can nullify it there and then. Okay, so the first case we're considering a case of total ignorance, that he just doesn't know this law at all. However, the second case is subject to machloket. Yodea ani sheyesh mefirin, aval eni yodea shezeh neder. Rabbi Meir omer lo yafer, hachamim omerim yafer. If he says, "I know the law of nullifying, I knew all about that. However, when she said a certain formula, I didn't know that was officially a neder." Right? She didn't use the normal, full, regular formula. She used some kind of a kinoi or some kind of unusual formula, and he didn't know. Now, this case is only partial ignorance, right? Because he had some idea that she made some kind of commitment that I'm not going to drink wine, even if she said it and not in the formula that he was used to. So he could have went and asked a sage, "Hey, my wife said it in this formula. Is that considered a vow? Do I have to nullify it? Do I not have to nullify it?" So this is considered more like partial ignorance. Therefore, the Meir says, "No, lo yafer. Sorry, you lost your chance. On the day that you heard her say that whatever fuzzy formula it was, you knew there was something up, there was something suspicious. You should have went and checked it out. If you didn't, you lost your chance." So partial ignorance is not a good excuse. The Meir would agree with the first case. Total ignorance is a good excuse, but not partial. Chamim said, no, in this case also, you can nullify it. Even partial ignorance is considered a good excuse. And says, well, you didn't know that it was a vow on that day. So the fact that you were quiet is not because you wanted it. You just didn't think that you had to do anything because you didn't think it was a vow. Okay, good. So that's the two opinions here. And now we're going to challenge actually both of them from the following case, following Baraita. Or minhu. Belo reot perat lesoma devrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir omer lerabot et hasoma. Okay, a totally different context. It does not seem to be very closely related, but it also has to do with ignorance. And we're talking about a case of someone who pushes an item without malice, and it hits a victim unintentionally, or a stone that causes death. This is the key phrase here, without seeing. And it fell on someone and the person dies. But he did not have a grudge against him before. There's no reason to think that he had a motive. And so obviously it was a mistake, right? So this guy was walking up on the roof and he pushed off a stone and didn't realize that there was someone underneath. So this person is, he was ignorant. He didn't know there was someone, but it's you could say it's partial ignorance because you should have looked, right? I mean, make sure, check if there's anybody there before you go and push a stone. Okay, so because he didn't do it on purpose, if it was on purpose, then it would be b'mezid. Then he would deserve capital punishment. If, on the other hand, it was a total mistake, with zero negligence, right? The person was doing everything perfectly fine, and just like out of complete thin air, something crazy happened. That person would be honest. Honest would not have to go to Ir Miklat, would not have to go to the city of refuge, right? So this halacha is talking about an in-between case of shogeg. The person did something, right? He did push a rock off the roof, so he knew that he was doing that. He just didn't think that there was anybody underneath. And therefore, he is partially responsible. He has to go to Ir Miklat. All right, that's the normal case. Now, the word belo re'ot, the machloket now is going to be, what about a blind person? Is a blind person considered the same or not? Maybe you'll say a blind person is like honest because he did not have the ability to look down and see if there's anybody there. And therefore, the blind person who pushes the rock is off the hook, doesn't even have to go to the city of refuge. Or do we say even a blind person has to take precautions? Go ask someone, can you look for me? Or try to hear, use his other senses. Or don't throw things off the roof. Don't put yourself in that kind of circumstance. So that's going to be the subject of the machloket here. So this word belo re'ot, Rabbi Yehuda says this comes to exclude a blind person. A blind person does not go to city of refuge. They're totally off the hook. Therefore, we see that a person of total ignorance, off the hook. Rabbi Meir, however, says that even though the blind person is totally ignorant and there's no way he could have looked, nevertheless, he is included in this law, and he does have to go to the city of refuge. Even though he's totally ignorant, he could have done something or other, and he's considered the same as shogeg. Okay, now this is going to be the point of controversy, or challenge, contradiction. Urminu. Rabbi Meir, our Mishnah, says, on the one hand, if there's total ignorance, that's the first case, then he agrees that that's a good excuse. But partial ignorance, because he just doesn't, he knew this was some kind of commitment, but didn't know that it was a neder, that's only partial ignorance, then that's not considered an excuse, and that's it, he lost his chance. So Rabbi Meir does make a distinction between total ignorance and partial ignorance. Yet, in this baraita, the Rabbi Meir does not make any distinction, and he says whether a person has sight or they're blind, meaning whether they are has sight means partially ignorant, or blind is total ignorance. He says they're both responsible, and so in the case of total ignorance, over here he says you are responsible, even though you're blind and you're totally ignorant about it. Nevertheless, you're responsible to the extent that you have to go to a city of refuge. And yet, in this case, the first one, when the person was totally ignorant because he didn't know even the laws of nullification, he is considered off the hook, right? That's considered a good excuse, and you can annul it later. So we have a problem between the first statement and this statement of Rabbi Meir. Now, for the Rabbi Yehuda, there are some Rishonim that try to find a contradiction between the Rabbi Yehuda and the opinion of Chachamim, which would include Rabbi Yehuda. However, I think that those commentaries are difficult, and instead we should follow the Rashba, who says that the contradiction here is only between Rabbi Meir and the Mishnah. Because Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim are actually quite consistent. They say in every single case that ignorance, any type of ignorance, is a good excuse, right? Whether you didn't know the whole law at all, it's okay, it's a good excuse. Or you didn't know this was a vow, good excuse, you can nullify it later. Or someone who was blind, good excuse, and you don't have to go to a city of refuge. Okay. The reason that pushes somebody Shonim to say Rabbi Yehuda is in contradiction is because in the answer that we're about to read, it does give an explanation for Rabbi Yehuda. However, it could be that this explanation for Rabbi Yehuda is just setting up the answer for Rabbi Meir to show how both of them will interpret this pasuk. Okay, so here we go. Here's the answer. Amarava. Hacha minyane dekrav, hacha minyane dekra. Each context is being read on its own within the context of that verse, and therefore they're actually reading the case of the blind person as an exception to whatever rule there is. So it really doesn't matter what they say in general about partial and total negligence, and they would still say their opinion about the blind person because of the way the pasuk has reads as follows: Rabbi Yehuda Savar, so regarding someone who's a murderer, and it says someone who comes in the forest with his neighbor to hew down wood. This pasuk is also about someone who's killed b'shogeg, but is from Sefer Devarim. So the other law, not b'midbar, but it has a similar law, but it gives it different examples. It says someone, a man goes with another fellow into the forest to cut down wood, and he swings his axe to cut down the tree, and the axe handle flies, the axe head flies off the handle and strikes the other, so he dies. So this is negligent. He didn't do it on purpose, but he should have checked his tools first, and therefore he has to go to the city of refuge. So noticing this setup here, why not just say he's cutting down wood? What is this that he comes with his friend into the forest? Why do you have to tell this whole story about that? So we learn, Kol devar me'alayad, v'sumanami me'alayad. Anyone can go into a forest. Even a blind person can go into a forest. He's going with his friend, right? That's totally fine. So therefore, those words are coming to include a blind person, and maybe he wants to come, and he's going to cut down wood also, right? With maybe a little help, but he can figure it out, and he'll be able to cut down wood. So that's how we know it from Devarim that it includes a blind person. And if you say, which is what Rabbi Meir says, that the word lo re'ot in Bimidbar is coming to include a blind person, well then I wouldn't need belo re'ot, because I already know from the forest that blind people go into the forest to cut down wood, so I already would know it. Ela shema mina belo re'ot pelat desomah. Rabbi Yehuda therefore says that's why I know that belo re'ot is actually coming to exclude a blind person, because it's kind of backwards. This thinking, because I have a pasuk in Devarim that includes a blind person, so this ambiguous pasuk in Bemidbar that says belo re'ot, and we don't know, does that mean that he didn't look or he cannot look? It's talking about a case that he cannot look, and if he cannot see, if a blind person, therefore it does not, right? Because I have another pasuk that includes him, this pasuk must exclude him. That's why I excluded the blind person. All right, now for the Yehuda, happens to be that it fits with the opinion of Chachamim that total negligence or partial negligence, here Soma has total negligence here and total negligence in the Mishnah, both get the person off the hook. It is a good excuse, so it's consistent anyway. Now, Rabbi Meir, that's why we really need this. Sabar ketib bebli da'at kol davar me'da. So in the pasuk again it says bebli da'at. He goes and kills someone unwittingly, without knowledge. So what did we learn from there? Kol devar meda v'soma la bar medahu. That means that anyone who's capable of knowing the danger that's involved. But a blind person is not capable of knowing that there's someone walking underneath the roof, since there's no possibility of him knowing, therefore he is off the hook. He doesn't have to go to a city of refuge. That's what I would say if I had only Sefer Devarim. However, and if you say, which is what Rabbi Yehuda says, that the words belo re'ot in Bemidbar come to exclude a blind person, he's off the hook totally, then why would I need those words in Devarim? I already know that. Therefore, that's how I derive that the words belo re'ot actually come to include a blind person, and say, sorry, even though you're blind and just total ignorance, nevertheless you're included. You after all killed someone, and you are therefore responsible. So even someone who is totally ignorant is responsible. Oh, so why should that be? Even though in the Mishnah they said otherwise, a total ignorant person in the beginning of the Mishnah is not responsible, because this is a gezerat hakatuv. This pasuk goes out of its way. There's actually two pasukim that work hand in hand, and from the combination of them, although one pasuk says what you would expect, that the blind person should be excluded, but the other pasuk comes to say, I'm sorry, we're including the blind person. In general, you're right, but this is an exception, and that's how we solve the problem of Rabbi Meir. All right, and now next Mishnah. Someone makes a vow against his son-in-law. I'm not going to give my son-in-law anything, but he does want to help out his poor daughter. This is like Kalba Sabuha, who excommunicates, who takes a vow against Rabbi Akiva. He doesn't like his son-in-law, but he still later on may feel bad about his daughter, that she's so poor. And so what can the father do to support his daughter without violating the vow? The problem is that a wife, her hand is considered like the husband's. We saw that before. And so anything that she acquires automatically goes to the husband's account. And so then that would violate the vow. By giving it to her, it's the same as giving it to the husband. So what can a father do to help out his daughter in such a case? So he has to say this kind of long statement. It has two parts to it, and we're going to discuss the relationship between the parts. He says, this money is given to you as a gift, with the condition that your husband has no rights to it. That's part one. Okay, so I'm giving it to you, and make sure, right, provided that he has no rights. If the husband takes it, then it's not yours to begin with, then it was not a gift. But that seems to be not sufficient. He also has to say, whatever you take with it and put in your mouth, then it'll be yours. In other words, this gift will work by you're holding the money, that's still mine. When you go and buy some food with it and put the food in your mouth, only at that moment, then the gift kicks in. So that way, it's yours when the food's already in your mouth, and that's why the husband has no access to it, because she's already eating it. It sounds like she can only use it to buy food, and the gift only kicks in when she eats that food. Okay, so now what's the relationship between these two statements? Does one work without the other? Rav says yes. It only works if he says both of these statements. This is a gift to you that won't go to your husband, and it will kick in when you eat something. You have to say both of those statements. Aval amar masha tirsiyasi kanayaton baal. But if he simply says, here, this is a gift to you, use it however you please, in that case, sorry, the husband gets it, right? He has to be very specific, because otherwise, if it's a general use item and it's hers from now to use however she wishes, then it doesn't work. It goes to the husband. Okay, whereas Shemuel says, no, this was giving an example here, but in fact, as long as the father says, right, this is yours as a gift, on condition that your husband doesn't get it, and you can use it however you want. The husband does not get it, right? And you don't need to say the entire second formula exactly as it is here. All right, so now matkif la Rabbi Zera. We're going to challenge the opinion of Rav, who says that she has to actually get it into her mouth before she acquires that gift, and if it's just a general gift, then her hand is like her husband. That's what we're going to challenge. Needs a couple of steps to fill out this challenge. Keman azla hashmata derav. Kirabi meir damar yad isha ki yad ba'ala. According to whose opinion would this statement of Rav be? Well, it would be according to Rabbi Meir, who said the hand of a wife is like her husband's hand. Now, Rabbi Meir actually said his statement regarding a slave, that the hand of a slave is like the master's. Whatever a slave acquires goes to the master. And I know, unfortunately, comparing a slave to a wife, but anyway, that's the that's the halacha according to this interpretation, that the wife is the same thing. Whatever a wife gets is going to go to her husband. Therefore, the wife cannot own the money in her hand at any point. It has to be that she's holding it and buys food, and once the food is in her mouth, then only then does she acquire that gift. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay, so this is following the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Or minhu. Here's the problem. We have a contradiction from a Mishnah in Eruvin. Kesad mishtatefin b'mavoy. Manich techavit v'omer hare leze lechol b'nei mavoy. מזכה להם על ידי עבדו ושפחתו העברים, ועל ידי בנו וביתו הגדולים, ועל ידי אשתו. Mishnah Nedarim says, how does it work to merge alleyways together? If on Shabbat, you have people that live in multiple alleyways, and all the alleyways as courtyards, multiple courtyards. You have one courtyard here, another one here, or another one here, and the people living in all these courtyards want to be able to carry in the alleyway. Similar to an eruv chatzerot, which is many houses within one courtyard, which is what we do today. But this is a second level. Even if the people in the various courtyards can carry within the courtyard, if they want to carry in an alleyway, then they have to have a shared meal. Okay, now the one way to do it is for someone to go around and collect a piece of bread from every courtyard and put it somewhere, put it in the alleyway, and that way they're sharing that space. You could do it that way, but if there's a lot of people living there, then that's hard to do. Instead, and this is what we do today for an eruv chatzerot, once a year, the people that are in charge of the eruv will take a box of matzah. Could be anything, but matzah is good because it lasts a long time. And one person who owns the matzah will give it to someone else and say, here, acquire this on behalf of everyone that lives within this boundary. And the person taking it, right, has in mind, I'm acquiring it not just for myself, but on behalf of everyone. That way, everybody has a share in that matzah. Everybody has a little piece in it. That way you don't have to have everybody in the whole neighborhood dropping off a sandwich, which would be inconvenient. So all that works. So here's how it would work here. You take a barrel full of wine or whatever it is, and the person who's organizing it will say, this is for everyone, right? Everyone has a share in this barrel. Now he can't just do it himself. He has to give it to someone, so someone else will take it on behalf of everybody else. Well, who can be that other person? It can even be his slave or maidservant who are Jewish, or his son or daughter who are adults, can't be children, and can't be Eved Kanaani. Those people would not be able to do it. And his wife. So a man can give it to his wife, and his wife will accept it on behalf of everyone else. What do we see from here? That a wife actually can acquire something. And if you say anything that the wife takes in her hand automatically goes to the husband, then when the husband gives it to the wife, he's just the same as giving it to himself, and it never leaves his domain. If it never leaves the husband's domain, then the wife does not acquire it for anyone else. But here it says a wife can use it. So we have a problem between Rav, who was following Rabbi Meir. Rav is applying what Rabbi Meir said about a slave not having a hand. Rav applies to a wife, and so on the one hand, according to that, a wife cannot acquire something for herself. That's why Rav and Mishnah had to say that she has to already be in her mouth. On the other hand, this source says pretty clearly that a wife can acquire something. So what do we do with that? Amar Rava, af agav damar b'meir yad isha ki yad ba'alah. Moded b'meir linyan shituf tekevand lezakot lacherim hu miyad ba'alah zachya. Rava will explain, even though Rabbi Meir said in the interpretation of Rav that the hand of the wife is like her husband's hands, and anything she acquires just goes straight to the husband. Nevertheless, Bimir would agree when it comes to this merging of alleyways, because she is acquiring it not for herself, but she's acquiring it for everybody else. She doesn't have to acquire it for herself, assuming that she lives in the same place as her husband. So her husband already acquired it for their home and their courtyard, but rather she's doing it for others from her husband. So for that purpose, she is able to have her hand, right? In this case, it also helps that the husband wants her to acquire it, and so is granting her that right. Whereas in the case of a father giving the daughter money, the husband would say, "I don't want you to have your own money. I want the money," and the husband is not allowing that to happen. So here, and that in addition to the fact that the woman is not acquiring it for herself, but for others. So this case is different, and so we have no contradiction, no problem. Hold on, this is not so fast. We have yet another braita that contradicts the Mishnah that we just cited. It says, "Elo shezakin lahen al yedeh beno ubito hagedolim ve'abdo v'shivchato ha'ivrim." If someone is making an eruv and they're in charge of it, and they have a barrel of wine, and they need to give the wine to someone else, so the following people can acquire it on behalf of others. It will be his son or his daughter who are adults, or his maid or maid servant who are Jewish. However, the following do not work. They cannot acquire it for other people, and that's his a minor son and daughter, his maid and maid servant, his servant and maid servant who are not Jewish, and his wife. According to this, a wife is not permitted, does not have the ability to acquire for anybody else, and that contradicts the Mishnah and the conclusion that we just said a second ago. So Rav Asher says, okay, let me explain the Mishnah in a different way. You're right. Really, a wife would not be able to acquire it on her own. Not the money from her father, and not for shituf mevoot. So this also resolves the contradiction that we had above. But we so that resolves this baraita, which says she has no hand, and our law, our Mishnah of the father giving money to the daughter, right? In both those cases, the wife cannot acquire something for herself. Now, the Mishnah in Eruvin, that was assuming a different case altogether, where she has her own courtyard in that very alleyway. A wife, it is possible for her to own her own land. If the husband gives to her, grants to her, and she has her own land, and that she alone has rights over, and so in that case, she has to acquire the food for herself in her courtyard, for her courtyard. And so since she can acquire it for herself, in that case, and in that case only, she can't acquire it for everybody else. So she does have her own property, so she can get that share of the food for her own property. She needs to. It wouldn't be necessary for everyone in the Mavoy to join in. So that's the case in the Mishnah in Eruvin, and that's an exceptional case where she does have her own way of acquiring property. However, in this baraita, which when she does not have her own courtyard, she cannot, and that explains the opinion of Rav in our Mishnah that the father would have to say, "This is yours as a gift. Your husband won't get it, and you acquire it when you buy food and put it in your mouth." And that's the only way that she would be able to enjoy that food, even enjoy a benefit from her father, even though the father made a vow not to give any benefit to his son-in-law. Baruch Adonai L'olam, Amen v'Amen.